Hello, everybody. Real quick, thanks for attending tonight. I'm David York. I am the Central Kentucky and Eastern Kentucky Employer Coordinator. I help people find jobs, and I help you sort of build up your confidence and things in looking for jobs. And so, Before we get to tonight's speaker, we have other guest speakers in the future. Next week, we don't have one, so we're going to be on a break there. But after that, we have Ken Baum with the Thrive Accelerator, really good program, worth tuning into, really good stuff. And then a couple weeks after that, we'll actually have a sort of a panel thing that I will be involved in. So if you want to hear me talk even more, you can come to that. So that should be entertaining. What else? Do not forget to fill out the Google form in your Google Classroom. If you can't find that, ask one of your mentors and they can help you, but we want to make sure you get credit for your attendance tonight. Again, this will be recorded, so no sweat if you want to check it out again. Real quick reminders, in general, unless you're asking a question or something like that, please keep muted. But Matt would like you to tune in at any time to ask questions. So you can unmute yourself and ask questions. You can raise your hand and ask questions, just the digital one, not the physical one. And that would be very convenient because it keeps it easy for us to track you. Or you can ask questions in the chat. Sometimes we can lose those though. So again, raise your hand if you have something you really want to ask. Other than that, we are joined by Matt Ruberg. And Matt Ruberg is the RC Tab Program Director, here to talk about his path in technology. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Matt.
Awesome, David. Thank you so much. And I am super happy and excited to be here today. My talk today is called Sustainable Tech, Sane Practices for a Sometimes Insane World. And when I was practicing my talk, I was pushing up on an hour, like almost every time. So I'm just going to get right into it. Howdy, everybody. Like I said, my name's Matt Ruberg with 1T, like a doormat. And I will tell a little story about Matt with 1T. I ask my mom like all the time, like, Mom, why Matt with 1T? Like usually there's 2 T's in Matthew. And she would put her hand on my shoulder and be like, "Oh, Matthew," and laugh and just walk away. And then a couple of years ago, like I asked her again, I said, "Mom, like why Matt with 1T?" And she said, "Oh, well, like I just messed up. Like I put the wrong thing on the birth certificate." And I don't blame her. It was a big day for her. I'm a twin, so she had 2 kids that day. And so that's why I ended up as Matt with 1T. But really, I actually love being Matt with 1T because I can't tell you how many times I introduce myself. I'll see someone way later, and I like kind of remember them, and they're like, "Oh, Matt with 1T." So it ended up being like actually something that was really great. And so yeah, that's a little story I like to tell, and I think it's important because that is one of the themes that I want to make for today's talk, which is mistakes. I think in our current environment, it makes it easy to pretend like successful people never make mistakes. Like with social media and all that, you can make everything look hunky-dory. And I'm going to brag about all the cool stuff I've got to do in tech today, but I'm also going to try to be as transparent as possible about all the mistakes I've made as well, because you don't get to do anything that you're proud of unless you take the risk to make those mistakes. And so that's something that I want people to be thinking about while I'm going through my talk today. And so the talk today is split up into 3 sections. First, and like the biggest part, the biggest time today. I'll just talk about my path in technology, all the different places that I've been and tech that I've worked with and environments that I've been in. And I'm going to talk about the usual stuff like that, but I'm also going to talk about the mistakes that I made at each place and how lucky I got at each place. That'll be hopefully like 30 minutes. And then I'm going to talk about wisdom I wish that I knew when I was getting started, when I was in your position, like getting started in a career in technology. And then I'm hoping to have time for Q&A like at the end. But like David said, if you want to dig in on something deeper, like raise your hand in here, and like I'm happy to stop, type stuff in the chat. I'm looking at the chat. And I really want y'all to drive this. I'm definitely going to be doing a lot of talking. I love to talk, but I want y'all to be a part of this too. So feel free to type at any time in the chat. And before I get in, I just want to like kind of a disclaimer, you know, I'm very lucky. I've been given privileges that not everyone has. You know, white, male, cis presenting. My parents paid for college. And this allowed me to take risks that other people might not be able to take. That led to a lot of mistakes, and mistakes that I hope y'all can learn from like in this talk. And that list of mistakes is really long, so let's get right into it. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about my path, my career in technology. I'm going to get started before I got my first job. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I went to UK, I got a poli-sci degree, and I was a philosophy major. I thought I might go to law school. That didn't end up happening. I really like had no idea. And so when I got done with school, I kept doing what I did during school, which is being a Pizza Hut delivery driver. Don't let anyone lie to you. This was probably the best job of my life. I got to just drive around, turn the music up, rip cigarettes at the time, and everyone's happy to see the pizza delivery guy. So I did that for a couple months after school because I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. But I said, hey, you know, like I need a real big boy job. I looked all around, and what I landed on was organic chemistry lab stockroom manager at the University of Kentucky. I have no idea who thought that I was capable of doing this. I think I took one chemistry class, and I remember one time, I think I almost blew up the Chem Phys building. I was cleaning up some chemicals, just putting them into a giant pile. The bag I was putting them in started melting and smoking. So yeah, I had no idea what I was doing here. But while I had that job, it was at UK, and I was able to take some classes for free. And I was able to get a degree, which at the time was called Decision Science and Information Systems. That's in the College of Business. So I had taken 1 or 2 computer science classes. I always thought computers were cool. I had taken AP computer science in high school. And this was actually out of the College of Business because I could not hang in real computer science. This is like diet computer science. I couldn't do the math. I couldn't do any of that. So that's how I ended up with a decision science degree. And I'll be perfectly clear, like I did not have the skills to be a developer, like at the end of this whole thing. You know, I could run code, but you know, I didn't have the skills to be like a full-time developer. But I figured that's what I wanted to do. I'm going to give it a shot. And I got a shot starting out at a company in Lexington called Vet Data. I saw an ad on Craigslist for phone support at this place called Vet Data. A question during the interview I will never forget was, on a scale from 1 to 10, how weird are you? My answer to that question was like at least a 9. And so I think that actually made me fit in. It was a very weird place. And I was the 12th person hired at Vet Data when I got started. Um, a little background on what Vet Data did. They were in animal healthcare data. And what they had was a piece of software that they would put on the server at animal clinics, like veterinary clinics. And every night on a schedule that would gather up all the data on that clinic. So their transactions, their appointments, all the medical history. It would pull that data every night, like to our cloud, clean it up, and we'd provide that to our partners. And my first position at Vet Data was basic phone support. We had a list of the stalest clinics. So whatever clinic had like sent their data the longest time ago, we would just go down that list, call them up, and try to figure out why their stuff was busted. Me and maybe like 3 or 4 other people, we would just call down that list. I learned a lot of just like basic computers at that point. I also learned that 9 times out of 10, the answer to someone's computer problem is to power down and power back up. First piece of wisdom tonight for what we're learning. And so I did phone support for a couple of months, learned quite a bit, spent a lot of time on hold on animal clinics, and learned that anything you can do for a human, you can do for an animal. Acupuncture, underwater therapy, it was pretty wild. But eventually I got a little more responsibility, and they asked me to do conversions. And in the animal healthcare space, there's 4 or 5 like major vendors of what they call a practice management system. That's like a UI and a database for all that information that I talked about. And clinics were constantly switching from like one vendor to another vendor. And when they did that, they wanted to pull all of their old data into their new system. And so that was my job. We had a like piece of software as a little UI. It was called Pervasive Data Transfer. It had like some basic connectors like to your input data with some basic scripting that you could do to move it to your output data. And I got to do that also for a couple of months. It was very interesting. I learned a lot about like veterinary data specifically. And then after about a year working there, I finally got my opportunity to be a real life software developer, which was like literally a dream come true. What did I do as a software developer here? Mainly what I did was kind of like hack into these different practice management systems, because the vendors of the practice management systems, they thought that like they owned the data for the practices, but we were of the opinion that the practices own their data and they could do whatever they wanted with it. So with the vendors not willing participants, we had to figure out how to pull that data from each of the major practice management systems. So that was a lot of C# development. And those practice management systems had all kinds of different ways to store that data. And we had to do all kinds of different like fun hacks to get into that data. Some of the better practice management systems had like a SQL database. We did some like decompiling of their code, like found their passwords and used that to pull the data. Some of the older practice management systems had just flat files, and we would go byte by byte, figuring out where different things were stored. Like I would take a snapshot of the file, I would change something in the UI, and then I would compare that to the file afterwards. And I just kept doing that until we had like figured out their entire schema of just this random file full of bytes. So that was like really fun. And another thing that I did while I was a developer there was after the data would get uploaded to our cloud, a job was queued up for our worker roles to like clean up that data, put it into generic format, like not practice management system specific, and then we loaded that data into like giant SQL databases in the cloud, and provided that as an API like to our partners. And so I did a bunch of like fine tuning of that process, trying to use less resources, and make sure it like elegantly failed and stuff like that. And then near the end of my time there, I did a little bit of web development, like some basic JavaScript. And so that is like my first dipping my toes into technology and development. And so talking a little bit about how lucky I was and the mistakes that I made. I mean, how lucky am I to have found a Craigslist ad and it turns out to be a legit company? It turned into a successful company. I was a 12-person hire. There were like 60 people by the time I left. I worked there for like 4 or 5 years. Like when I started, we didn't even have version control. I remember it was me and one other developer when I like became a developer. He was gone on vacation and I physically had to get on his machine. We had to call him and ask for his computer password because he had some code on his computer that I didn't have. And it was very difficult because he had a trackball mouse. And it's like, who does this? But yeah, that's what happened when I started. But again, like I said, it was good people. They were bought out by another company. They were able to hire a bunch of really great devs. I was able to learn under them. I spent like nights afterwards whiteboarding problems. I got really lucky there. And space to grow in my career while the company was growing as well. Let's talk about mistakes at this place because I made plenty of mistakes here. One big mistake that I remember, very first conversion that I did, production outage. For some reason, we decided we had a group of maybe like 100 clinics. They were moving them from whatever they were on to like one new system. We planned like for weeks to move them over. We did a bunch of practices in-house. For some reason, we decided to convert over their biggest hospital. It's a 24-hour animal clinic. We plan to have like a 1 or 2 hour downtime. We do the conversion. We fire it back up. Nothing's working. We spend, I think, like 12 or 15 hours all overnight. Myself, another like 3 other people trying to figure out what's going on. Like they have people working at the clinic, not able to work because their system doesn't work. Turns out there was one column that was nullable. You could physically put null in there, but the application was expecting like zeros if nothing was in there. Took us 15 hours to find that out. Not fun. Not a good way to get started. Another mistake I remember, we were building like local dev environment, working on some project. We fire it up. We're working on it all day. And then we start getting emails from people saying that they were getting reminders for their pets' birthdays who had died years ago. Turns out we had not like flagged that this was just a development environment. And one clinic's entire set of pets got birthday reminder emails that day. That took a lot of apologies to make okay, but then the last mistake, really like the biggest mistake that I made while I was there was I thought that I could be the best programmer of all time. I think I remember actually like writing that down in like my diary or something like that. And why that was a mistake is because I'm not the best programmer of all time. And what that led to was me like beating myself up all the time for like these tiny mistakes, like that anyone makes when they're getting started. It got so bad, I burned myself out. I actually left for like 2 or 3 months to just like get my head right until I basically ran out of money. I came back and was like, hey, can I get my job back? They gave me my job back. But that was a big mistake. And when we talk about the wisdom later, we'll talk about this a little bit more. But that was that data. That was my first try. It was great. One thing that I learned there was sitting in front of the computer all day as like a full-time dev was not my thing. I love talking. I love talking with people. And I worked with a lot of really good project managers while I was there. A good meeting with the right people could save me like nights of coding against a deadline. And I wanted to try my hand at being like a project manager. I didn't have any training except for working with one. I looked out for a way to get started as a project manager, and I ended up getting that opportunity at another place called Beyond Pulse. So after 5 or 6 years at Vet Data, I moved to Beyond Pulse as just like a project manager. And what does Beyond Pulse do? They put sensors on soccer players, and those sensors track their heart rate and their movement while they're practicing. And then that data is fed to coaches and players so that they can kind of like see how their bodies are responding to like the practice that they have set up so they can be better players and coaches. Talking a little bit about the tech that we used for this project. The sensors were C++. And I remember if anyone has ever made like buttons, like a button press, we had this machine that looked exactly like a button press that you would open up the back of the sensors, put the sensors in it, like clamp it down, and then you plug like a USB-C into that machine. And that's how we flash the ROM on these sensors. They were like super basic sensors, all in C++. The picture you see on here is the Android app. We had an Android app and an iOS app that used Bluetooth at the beginning of a practice to like tell all the sensors to turn themselves on and start keeping track of a practice. And then at the end, they would connect with Bluetooth, pull all the data off of each of the sensors, and send that up to like our cloud. And then we had a website that all that data got sent to for players and coaches to look at their stats. The website was Java. On the back end, I think like Bootspring is what they were using. I don't remember exactly. On the front end, we used React and JavaScript. And near the end of my time there, I was at Beyond Pulse for like a year and a half. We transitioned to Vue.js. And then there was a giant Postgres SQL database that had all the sync data from the sensors and like what we needed for the website. And so what did I do at Beyond Pulse? I was the project manager. So and the only tech person on the team. It was a startup culture. There was like I think 4 or 5 full-time people, including me. 3 of them were the founders who were just soccer guys. They had no tech experience. And so I did a lot of troubleshooting of hardware, like the sensors. If you think it's hard to debug your code where you can step through it and it's on your computer, try doing it on a sensor that doesn't have a UI and is like 400 miles away from you. It was not fun at all. I also did a lot of troubleshooting of the algorithms that we used. So the sensors got just basic data. It's just like your phone, like a gyroscope. Um, so it could tell like where you were moving and how fast, and it got your heart rate every 2 seconds. But you can see on the UI here, we showed like distance traveled, workload, AP is active participation, like how often you're just doing anything. And so there was a lot of algorithms to like clean up that data and show it to people. And then I was the like scrum master. I was leading an agile team there. So I did all of the sprint planning. I worked with the developers to make estimates and try to prioritize like all of the insane ideas that people had for what to add into the product. And one thing that I want to talk about at this place was, like I said, we were a startup, so we only had like 5 or 6 full-time employees, but we had a ton of consultants who we kind of like farmed out a lot of our work to. This picture is me in Serbia because our development team was like 12 people from Serbia. We also had contractors. Our sensor manufacturers were from Finland, and the sports lab that did our like algorithms was from Switzerland. And so I had never worked in an environment like that before, and let's just say it was also a very huge learning curve. So that's the tech at Beyond Pulse. I want to talk a little bit about the mistakes and why I was lucky, and then we'll maybe take some time for like questions or digging in real quick. Mistakes. Look, this was legit startup culture. I remember we would go to these big soccer tournaments with like dozens of teams, and the sales guys would let teams use the sensors for free just to like kind of get to do a test run for it. But when we were doing that, we were not ready for prime time. Stuff was broken. It wasn't showing up right. And so like on those weekends, I remember staying up like all night, hand editing reports, scrubbing data, cleaning up stuff. It was not enjoyable. And that led to other problems on these weekends. Like I remember one time we were having a big problem where the sensors were dying like way quicker than we were expecting. And I gathered up all of the consultants, all the different people that we were working with, because no one kind of like knew what the actual problem was. And I don't know if anyone's seen the Spider-Man meme where like all the Spider-Mans are pointing at each other, but this was exactly what was happening in that meeting. And lack of sleep, probably way more caffeine than I should have had, like with coffee. I remember being like physically removed from the like phone call where we were talking about what the problem was, because I'm like yelling at consultants and so it was a learning curve, but definitely some bumps along the road. And I think another mistake that I made, similar to the last position, was I wanted to be the best project manager ever, but what that led to was a short fuse with other people. I expected them to buy in automatically, to kind of know that it's important to do backlog grooming and do sprint planning, and that was not always the case. It was hard to get buy-in, and so that was pretty difficult. But I was really lucky. First of all, because my brother-in-law was the CEO there, and so I had a long leash for what I could do and like getting started. And then before we take a little break for questions, I think I saw a question there. While I was over there in Serbia, I was trying to describe to them what Kentucky is. I found this slide in my slide deck that I brought over there. And so just some more maybe audience participation. Like, did I miss anything? Like, what drop in the chat, like, what did I miss about Kentucky? I think I nailed it like pretty good, but yeah, seeing nothing, I think I agree. I think I did a pretty good. Yeah. Okay, Steven, basketball, yeah. Okay, so I think I saw some QA questions. I don't know where those are, David. I don't know if now's a good time to.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, I can read them too if you'd like. So first one is asked by L. That is, how do you quell your greatest dev of all time ambitions, not only in general but real time situationally? What do you do to quell that?
Oh, that's a great question. Deep breaths, a lot of practice, I think. And we'll cover this a little more like at the end when I'm dropping some wisdom bombs. But I think there's it's really just practice every single day. There's never going to be this like perfect algebra for like, okay, if I just do these things, like I'm going to be successful. And I think being compassionate to yourself, like as you're going through and learning, is like one of the best ways to quell that. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's practice. Just like learning how to code, like learning how to be compassionate to yourself, is like an excellent skill. And I'll talk a little bit about that like later in the talk here.
And then we'll get to kitties in just a moment, but Stephanie also asked a question, which is, when working with people in other countries, how do you work around time zone issues?
Yeah, so everyone when I was at Beyond Pulse was like Europe time, so they were 6 hours ahead of me. And it actually ended up being amazing because with just a little bit of like being intentional about when you schedule meetings and how you do things. Like I said, I was the project manager, so I like needed to work with people all the time, and I had from 9 o'clock when I started until noon to like work with people because they got off at like 5-6 p.m. their time, which was like noon my time. So I would plan like all my meetings then, and then it actually worked out great because for the second half of the day, like I was all by myself, able to like go heads down and like actually get some work done. So just like being intentional about those different time zones is like really what you have to do. And it's just like, again, like a lot of practice. We tried different things and like consistently reviewed like what was working and what wasn't working, and just like transparent with those people. I was lucky. I worked with like some great people over there.
Kitty, you're good to go ahead and ask your question.
Kitty, if you're talking, I think you're muted.
We can circle back around to that too. So let's go to Kyle. How has ChatGPT and alternatives changed the production expectations you have for the people on your projects?
So I haven't got into ChatGPT that much. And even if I did, I wouldn't have it change expectations at all because I wouldn't tell anyone that I have help, because I want to like set expectations that I can hit. And I'm always like, as a agile project manager, I'm always looking for ways that I can set expectations that I can hit. So like I personally don't use Chat GPT that much, but I was actually just talking to one of our devs who said that he uses it like for a lot of scaffolding, and he uses like a Git has like a sidekick or something that's like in your IDE. I think he said he uses that a lot, but as for how it changes like expectations, like it's Copilot. Thank you, Al. Yes. And Kyle, use it to soften language in my emails. A+. That's the most that I use it is for like tone and helping me like communicate. So yeah, I don't use it too much, but I know for a lot of people it's like a really big thing. So cool.
We'll circle back around to Kitty if you're available. If not, we can just keep going. Whatever you think.
Yep, sounds perfect. Yeah, and we'll have time hopefully at the end
Yeah,
for like
got
QA
no
and
sweat
this
there too.
all figured out. So I was at Beyond Pulse for a while. It was great. I got to try being a project manager, which I really, really enjoyed. But like I said, I was always a political science guy. I'm into civics. Like American government is super interesting to me. And I wanted to try something different and apply the tech experience that I had to a problem that I really cared about because, like animal healthcare, while interesting, is not my passion. So I kind of changed careers, and I found this place called DigiDims. And what is DigiDims? DigiDims is a group that recruited a cohort of about 70 technologists. And that means like people who were longtime coders, people who were just out of boot camps. I think actually like 3/4 of the people in that cohort of 70 were boot camp graduates. And what they did was we became campaign contributions. So what they did was they would embed us on a political campaign, some like U.S. congressional campaigns, some U.S. Senate campaigns, and this was in 2020. So some like presidential, like statewide campaigns. And we were just told to do whatever the campaign asked of us, which was exciting and frightening at the same time. And so what did I do on my campaign? I got plugged into a congressional campaign down in Texas. And I showed up virtually because it was the pandemic and said like, okay, what do you want me to do? And they were like, I don't know. What do you think you should do? So I spent a lot of time sitting in with people, figuring out how a campaign works because I've never been on a campaign before. I've never done politics before. And what I quickly found out was raising money was an extremely important part of being on a campaign. And so I was really lucky. I had 70 other people who were also trying to figure out what they were supposed to do on their campaigns. So I would regularly meet with them and message with them, and I had made some connections with people. And I asked them, like, what should I do? Turns out someone already had made a like little app to do something to help with finance. A little app that I like to call Operation Cash Lightning. And what was this app? So it was Google Sheets with a Google Apps script like plugged into it. And if y'all haven't checked out Google Apps scripts, I would highly suggest it. It is like literally magic and unbelievable. And what happened on the campaign was 80% of the people who were hired there for 8 days, for 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, they would call people and ask them for money. And any information they could have to make that more successful had a huge impact. And so what Operation Cash Lightning did was at the beginning of a day, the people that they were about to call, they would enter their like demographic information just in a Google spreadsheet. Once they were done with that, they would hit a button and the app script would hit the FEC API where all political donations are recorded and see the type of donations that those people made. And what it would do is it would filter down donations to candidates who were like our candidate. So candidates, if we saw someone giving regularly like $5,000 to candidates who were similar to our candidate, then when we called them up on the phone, we would ask them for $5,000. And if we saw someone like regularly giving $100 to candidates like ours, we would ask them for $100. And if we saw them not really giving, then like maybe we wouldn't call them. And so that helped that team like come armed with information to their phone calls. And it was just a simple Google Sheet output, kind of like filtered down to each person they were going to call. The thing about campaigns is they start and they stop. So there's no time to like build up this big infrastructure. And the campaign ended up raising almost $10 million. Not all of that was because of this app, but it had a lot to do with it. And people thought that it was absolute magic. I was like a wizard, and I copied like 80% of this from someone else at DigiDems. But I wasn't, gonna spill the beans, but it worked out great. I learned a lot on this campaign. I learned a lot about how much of a superpower having technology is. Like this is a simple thing, really, right? A basic Google Sheet, but it was literally magic to people on the campaign. And I got to do a lot of cool stuff in this campaign. This is me on a Zoom with Nancy Pelosi and Willie Nelson. So if you had that on your bingo card for tonight, like go ahead and scratch that off. That was like unbelievable. So really cool, but all good things must come to an end. The campaign was over, and I was on to something else. And the next thing I did, I kind of changed careers again. I won't dwell too long on this. It wasn't really tech-centered. I'm still in politics. I worked at the National Democratic Redistricting Committee. So basically, we helped, after the census is taken every 10 years, they redraw like the maps. And I helped like advocate for fair maps. I was a digital organizer. So I was basically just like helping people like make phone calls to their representatives to like yell at them to do the right thing. And I did a lot of like targeting. So I would make lists of people to call. And it was okay. Actually, it wasn't okay. As you see on here, it sucked. It was a bunch of bureaucrats, a bunch of lawyers. And the biggest mistake that I made while I was there was just not being myself. I think that I learned a lot, but I knew that technology was something that I cared about. And so I learned from this. I was lucky because I was so depressed after seeing this. I was kind of depressed with our options politically. And I found out about ranked choice voting. And that's where I'm at right now. And another quick audience participation, put a 1 in the chat if you've heard of ranked choice voting. I'll give the quick spiel. Instead of voting for one candidate per contest, you can rank candidates in order of your preference, first, second, third, and so on. I love seeing all these ones. Let's go. If your first choice can't win, your vote is transferred to your second and third choice. There's a ton of great benefits to that. Ultimately, like increasing competition, like giving us better representatives. But before I talk about the resource center where I'm at right now, I have to do a quick U-turn because I didn't get this job. I applied for the job. I went through like the 2 interviews. I felt super good. I talked to the developers. And then I was told that they weren't hiring me. I was like literally devastated because, like I said, this is like my dream job. It's technology, it's politics, it's actually legit. And I was like kind of devastated. But I was like, I need feedback. Like, why did I not get this job? And they gave me some generic, like, oh, there were other people. I was like, no, like, what specifically do I need? Like, I sent them a bunch of emails, and eventually they were like, well, we wanted to hire someone with election experience as opposed to technology experience. And I was like, well, I think you're wrong, but okay, whatever. So I decided they also said, we want someone with experience working with local officials. And so I said, okay, well, I'm going to get experience working with local officials then. So I worked at the Louisville Public Library as a community engagement coordinator. Basically, I was a lobbyist for the library. I would go to city council and try to advocate for money for the library. I still did some cool tech stuff. This is a map that I made of all the library locations overlaid with the local like state legislature districts, because we would have we would invite them to like candidate forums, and we never knew who to invite because we didn't know whose district was where. So I still got to do cool tech stuff at the library. But that's a little side note. Eventually, the resource center called me back and said, hey, like a year later, they're like, you know what? We actually need someone with technology experience. And I was like, I knew it. So I got hired at the resource center. That's where I'm at right now. And I am the RC Tab program manager. What is RC Tab? RC Tab is a piece of election software. So we don't like get involved in like marking ballots or anything. There are other vendors that have the actual machines where you write a ballot. But those machines have an electronic record of a ballot called a cast vote record. We take those cast vote records and put them into our tabulator, and we tabulate the winner of a ranked choice voting election. The tech that we use Java. It's all written in Java. We use Gradle like to build our project, and Maven as our repository. And the output of our tool is just round by round results for who's the winner of the election. One thing that I kind of want to brag about, all of this is open source and free to use for people. We have a GitHub. We use GitHub Actions like to build like installers. And our development team, for the most part, is all volunteer pro bono developers who like their day job is developing, but then they come and help out at the resource center, you know, to feel good. And not only is our code open source, but we do, GitHub has something called GitHub Projects, which is amazing. So all of our issues are on there. Everything that we're working on is on there. And I would suggest anyone who wants to get like a real look into how like work makes it from idea to a like completed pull request, go check out like our GitHub. And I have a like link to a bunch of resources at the end of the talk here. So that's where I'm at right now, y'all. That's my very windy path to get to where I'm at. And knowing we only have 8 minutes left, I just have a couple pieces of wisdom that I want to send you guys off with before I get out of here. You know, one thing that I said before, I think that tech and being in tech truly is a superpower. It's enabled me to weasel my way into spaces that I would never have access to. Like I never would have been on a campaign without tech. I never would be doing something that pays the bills and has an impact. Like I think if I didn't get into technology. And the other thing is you don't have to get some fancy job like at a huge company, like at a FANG company, like right out the gate. Like you can find a weird place on Craigslist and still like turn out okay. And there's 6 things that I quickly want to touch on and want to pass along. The first thing, things are not going to make sense. Why your code isn't doing something can be hunted down, but why your work isn't appreciated or why someone won't hire you sometimes is just not going to make any sense. And what going back to like, okay, like how do the question asked about like, how do you handle this? One thing is that I like to use is the serenity prayer. I don't know how many of y'all have heard of this. Boil it down, basically, there are things that you have control over, there are things that you don't have control over, and wisdom is knowing the difference between the two. I think you'd be surprised at how many things are in your control that you think aren't, and how many things you think you can change, but it's really up to other people. And this is wisdom that you only get from practice. It's hard to learn this like in a book or in boot camp. The next thing that I want to talk about, and here's some time for some audience participation. What is the opposite of fragile? I think like we can describe fragile, it's like breaking easily. And yeah, what sturdy, strong, flexible, resilient. That's a good one. Robust. All good answers. But I'm going to make the suggestion, and this is not my idea, but I'll link to the original idea and the resources, that the opposite of fragile is anti-fragile. Like even further than resilient, like not breaking, is like getting better from uncertainty and making mistakes. Expecting a certain amount of uncertainty and making mistakes. That's something you can learn from, and uncertainty and making mistakes is an opportunity for reflection. And it's important to make mistakes that are not catastrophic. So like going bankrupt, right? But, like failing at a conversion is a mistake that you can make. And being with that uncomfortableness long enough to learn what it's trying to tell you, and then just letting it go, right? And I think like going back to that question of like thinking that I'm the best programmer ever, like when I am not the best programmer ever, okay, like why am I struggling here? And then letting it disappear. And that example is that I like to use, like not getting hired at the resource center. Like at that point in my career, like I knew, like there were things I could control, and there are things that I can't. And so that's how to be anti-fragile. The third thing, curiosity is the most important trait. You cannot be afraid to ask questions, especially as you're getting started. Good questions are like, what is your opinion on this? Asking people to like who are more experienced, like how they think about it, or how do you do that successfully? I meet a lot of people who do things that I've never done before, and I always ask them like, "Oh, you're a salesperson? Like, how do you do sales successfully?" And I notice a lot of themes even across like all different things. And I think it's important to be curious towards technology and the people you work with. Like, what are their motivations? What are their incentives? Which transitions into connect with people as much as humanly possible. I know we're all developers. We're all a little nerdy, but this is really important. As a developer, it's easy to say, well, I'm here to be in front of the computer and just lay down code, but that only goes so far. And I think where it really helps is within an organization. If you're wondering why a project is floundering and no one wants to work on it, curiosity and like talking to people, meeting them at like the water cooler, and just like having a reason to talk to them without expecting something is a good way to do that. It's a little harder now working remote, but you can still do something like that. And this takes practice, just like coding. You're not going to be good at it at first. I still get super nervous when I go to networking events, like before this talk tonight. Like I get really nervous, but it's something that you can practice. Two more things. One thing is set goals, but not just goals. Also write down your values. What is the difference between goals and values? Values are things that you are not willing to compromise on. Things that you know that you're going to do no matter what. And believe me, the time will come when you will need the strength that your values give you, when you need to have that tough conversation, when you need to do that hard work. It will always help you. It will also help you when you inevitably fail. because even if you fail to reach your goal, you can still move towards your values in a way that you're proud of. So like values like being curious, not being afraid to make mistakes, like those are some of mine that I think everyone will help everyone. And again, like that example of not getting that job at the resource center, knowing my value of like being curious and like trying to figure out how this stuff works, like that helped me. This is something that I have written down on my at my desk, the Scrum and Agile values. I have a link to this in the resources I'm going to pass along. And I look at this all the time, like on weekly. And the last thing that I just want to say is to be yourself and show yourself compassion. All of the energy that you spend trying to fit in is energy that's not spent moving towards your values. Do the hard work so that you can be yourself. And no one else can tell you how to do that. Like I said, there's no perfect algebra. If you just do these things, like you'll figure it out. And compare how you would counsel, think about how you would counsel like a best friend when something bad happens. You did what you could, the rest was out of your control. It's an opportunity to learn versus a lot of times your inner monologue. I can't believe you weren't prepared. You should be ashamed. That second part like will work sometimes, but it's not sustainable. And that's what this talk is all about, sustainable tech. So I hope that y'all can take something away from here and learn from the mistakes that I made. And I'll put in the resources link for people who said all this stuff way better than I did, for people who can like learn more.
We'll also post all the resources with the recording once the recording's ready. So no sweat if you can't grab it. No big deal. No big deal at all. We do have one question that's been pending for a minute, so I'm going to go ahead and ask it. If people have to drop off, that's okay. We don't have time for any more questions after this, but I wanted to get this one in. So L asks, when switching jobs, how awkward was that for you? On one hand, it's supposedly a high transition industry, but on the other hand, changing jobs seems to have sort of a stigma to it. So was that a problem for you?
Yeah, it was absolutely a problem for me, because when I got started, and thank you everyone. I know if you all have to leave, like all good. I can stay for as long as people are interested in asking questions. It was like really tough at first because, like I don't want to let people down. I don't want to leave a job that I'm working at. But at the end of the day, this is a business and it's a business decision. And so, if like going back to like your values, writing down your values and looking at those, like when you're making the decision about whether I should change jobs, ultimately it's a business decision and you don't owe anyone anything, like unless they like are going to pay you to do that. And so I think as much as you can, kind of taking a step back and looking at it with like without too many emotions, I think is the best thing. And then like being maybe like worried about how that is perceived like at a new place that you're going to. I think that you can communicate it in a way that is like a positive, right? Like I was talking about curiosity. Like I talk a lot when I'm going through all my work history or people ask me about it. Like I'm curious about how things work. And if you're going to someone who doesn't appreciate curiosity and someone like trying to find a place that like works for them and pays the bills, well, then maybe that's not a place that you should be working at, would be my answer to that.
And well, thanks for the insight and everything. But that's pretty much all the time we have. Unfortunately, wish we could really stick around longer, but have to get dinner and things. So thanks a lot, Matt.
Yeah,
Appreciate you very much.
for sure. And like all my contact information is on here. I'm on all the Slacks. Like hit me up. I'm happy to talk. If anyone has any questions, an hour is not enough. I could talk about this stuff all day. So happy to help out any way I can for anyone who's getting started. And again, like I'm happy to stay here if I don't know if people have other questions and stuff.